Devil Doll by Frederick E. Smith. Marilyn pouted.
You must have heard of Frederick, darling. You're just being difficult.
I've heard about his act, I agreed. It's supposed to be very good. But what's all the talk about?
About his partner, dear. The one he killed.
I sat up at that. Killed? Do you mean it?
Well, it was an accident, I suppose,
she said reluctantly.
You see, Varelli used to do a hypnotist act with a partner called Gardini. Gardini used to do the most astonishing things under hypnosis. Walk through fire and all that sort of thing. But one night, when carrying an awful lot of weights on his stomach, he collapsed and died, without coming out of his trance.
What happened to Varelli? Marilyn raised one slim shoulder and sighed.
His act was banned. Such a shame.
Shame be damned, I grunted. But what has all this to do with his present act? He's a ventriloquist now, isn't he? With a dummy. Marilyn's big blue eyes grew round.
That's it. Don't you see? His dummy isn't normal. Everyone says that. The story goes that Gardini, who died while still under Varelli's influence, is under it still. Varelli holds his soul captive in the dummy. That's why it can do such amazing things.
Ha! What a load of balderdash! I howled. Do you mean Varelli tells this to his audience?
He doesn't exactly tell them it,
Marilyn said cautiously.
But that's the story that has got around.
That's the story his publicity agent has thrown out, you mean? People actually believe it. I shook my head in despair. Marilyn gave me her severe look.
Why shouldn't they believe it? You're too material, darling. That's always been your trouble. You'll believe nothing your eyes can't see and your nose can't smell. It's terrible.
So it is, I agreed. Terrible. But I don't like what I hear of Varelli, cashing in on your partner's death. Even if you did only kill him accidentally. Isn't quite my idea of good taste. What's all this about? What do you want me to do? She smiled now, dazzlingly.
Darling, even if you are naive, you're also very sweet. I would like you to ask Mr. Varelli if he'll come to my birthday party on the 28th and give a show for me. He'd be such an attraction. Besides, I would like to talk to him about the occult.
The occult was the trouble. Marilyn had been dabbling in it for years. She had graduated from playing with fairies in her pram to playing with planchettes in her bedroom. None of her friends took her seriously, but me, I had no option. We were getting married later that year. I was hoping to put her right in time. You'd only find he was a fake, like the rest of them, I told her, and he'd charge you a packet for a private show. I had little hope that that would put her off the idea. Her father was a steel magnate and rolling in money. It did not. Her reply was almost absent-minded.
Never mind what he charges, darling. Just get him for the 28th. That's all I want.
I was going to suggest she asked him herself, then hesitated. Marilyn was too good-looking a lass to start roaming around alone after variety stars. All right, I grunted. I'll ask him. Perhaps I can get him drunk enough at the party to tell you his secrets. They might disillusion you.
For a skeptic, you're quite a darling,
she purred, kissing my cheek. I turned the other one, but she shook her blonde head.
Only after you've got Varelli for me, dear.
I had never felt like that in a theatre before. I don't want to feel like that again. The trouble was that I was in the stalls, only 3 rows back, and that damned dummy came within 20 feet of me. I had decided to see Varelli personally. At first I had thought of phoning his agent, but on reflection decided against it. Varelli was no struggling artiste. In fact, quite the reverse. and he might well refuse a late private engagement. No, the way to catch him was through his vanity. Marilyn and her parents were well-known social figures, and the birthday party was going to be something of an occasion. The press would be well represented. With publicity the lifeblood of his profession, I felt Varelli would jump at an invitation to attend as a private guest. So I rang him personally. He showed immediate interest, and I offered to meet him at the theatre after the show. He offered me a complimentary ticket, and as Marilyn had now awakened my interest in his act, I accepted his offer. I picked up the ticket at the box office at 8:15 and was taken to the third row of the stalls. The first half of the show was very average, and it dragged. The second half was no better until Varelli appeared. Then it became fantastic. The curtain rose to show Varelli seated in a chair in the centre of the stage. On one knee he was holding his ventriloquist dummy, except for one spotlight which set him off in an ice-blue radiant pool. All the other lights had been doused. Varelli was a thin, pale man, with sleek black hair and deep-set eyes. He had the unhealthy pallor so often seen in southern Frenchmen or Spaniards who have suffered the English climate a shade too long. His dummy seemed the normal type of doll used by ventriloquists, although it was perhaps a trifle larger than most. After their initial ovation, the audience sat very quiet. Clearly they were expecting something out of the ordinary. They were not disappointed. Varelli started off with the usual ventriloquist's patter, though it was much slicker than usual. The dummy's replies were astonishingly natural. In fact, occasionally it sounded as if there were an overlap in their remarks to one another. I told myself that must be caused by the acoustics of the theatre. However, it was a remarkable performance. But it was nothing beside the finale. After a particularly enthusiastic round of applause, Varelli suddenly lowered the dummy until its dangling feet touched the floor of the stage. From the sudden hush that followed, I guessed this was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Varelli was talking to the dummy. He had a rather fascinating voice with a slight foreign accent. "Listen, Hugo. The kind people are clapping us. Go to the front of the stage and thank them." He tried to balance the ridiculous doll on its sagging legs. At first they gave way, and there was a titter from the audience. But a general gasp of surprise followed. Varelli had taken his hands away, and the thing was standing. "Go on, Hugo. Go and thank the kind people," Varelli said softly. The dummy swayed and moved. For a moment it seemed it would fall. Then it tottered forward a few steps, its arms waving grotesquely as it strove for balance. Its painted, grinning face stared blindly forward at us. The spotlight followed it. Behind me, a woman let out an hysterical laugh. I sat paralyzed in my seat, unable to believe what I was seeing. The thing reached the front of the stage and stood there swaying like a drunken dwarf. Varelli had not moved from his chair. "Say thank you to the kind ladies and gentlemen, Hugo," he called from the darkness. The thing's lower jaw dropped and lifted a few times, experimentally. The wooden click of it came to me quite clearly, making me feel sick. The doll paused, as if gathering strength. Then its wooden face split open again.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
The woman behind me was whimpering with fear now. The rest of the theatre was unnaturally quiet. The doll stood before us, its arms flopping about frantically as it strove for balance. "Well done, Hugo," Borelli said from his chair. "Now bow and say good night."
Good night,
bowed the thing. "Now, come back to your master," said Borelli. The doll turned and tottered back across the stage, its arms waving like a miniature windmill. Beside me, a man cursed under his breath. Borelli rose as the dummy approached him, bent down and picked it up under his arm. Instantly it went slack and inanimate. The spell was broken. Applause rolled forward in deafening waves. Borelli came forward, the spotlight accentuating his thin features and deep-set eyes. He bowed deeply. Then he held out the doll. The odd thought came to me that the applause for the doll was greater than the applause for him. Our backstage meeting was a success. Borelli, flattered by the invitation, was easily baited when I told him how interested Marilyn was in his act. He looked up at once, his dark eyes calculating. "Do you think—" Then his waving hands pretended to dismiss his words. But no, it would not be appropriate." "I beg your pardon?" I asked, feeling the fish on the line. He shrugged. "I was just thinking that perhaps it would make your fiancée happy if I took Hugo along with me and gave an exhibition, but it might not suit such an occasion." My smile came very easily. "Would you do that? She'd be delighted." I leaned forward. "She dabbles in the supernatural and all that nonsense, and believes you have some strange power over that dummy of yours. She'll be thrilled to death if you put on a show." "I shall be delighted," Borelli purred. His deep-set eyes fixed themselves on me. "But you do not believe in the supernatural, Mr. Blake?" I grinned and shook my head. "You do not believe this story about Hugo and me?" he murmured. "Or have you not heard it?" "Oh, I've heard it," I yawned. "It's a novel one, I'll give you that, but a little too far-fetched for me, I'm afraid." "Far-fetched? But why, Mr. Blake?" he asked softly. I didn't like Borelli's tone, his conceit, or his veiled sneer. I thought it best to go before I spoiled everything. So I picked up my hat. "It's a clever act," I said. "Very clever. How you do it, I don't know, but I don't have to believe in fairies to appreciate it." His lips twisted into the semblance of a smile. I could see I had hurt his vanity. My contempt grew. "My fiancée will have a room prepared for you," I told him. "And a car will meet you outside the theatre. Shall we say at 10:30? "Very well, Mr. Blake. Thank you." Suddenly, he turned his head sharply. "Listen! Do you not hear something?" Beside me, curtains screened off an alcove in the wall. Behind them, I heard a scrabbling sound, as if an animal were pawing at the wall. A gibbering sound followed, for all the world as if a dumb thing were trying desperately to speak. Then a moan that made my blood run cold. A tortured soul in hell could not have sounded more horrible.
"Help me,"
it wailed.
"Help me, whoever you are. Get me out. Free me, for the love of heaven."
I stood petrified. Borelli was watching me, his thin face twisted in a sneer. He turned and pulled wide the curtains. "Be quiet, Hugo," he said. "You will get no help from Mr. Blake. He does not believe in you." I stared in horror. In the alcove was a small cage with a padlocked door. Leaning against the door, lolling is perhaps the better word, was the dummy Hugo, and its painted wooden face seemed to hold a look of agonized pleading. "Go to sleep, Hugo. Mr. Blake will not help you," Borelli sneered. "Lie down and sleep." Before my staring eyes, the doll folded up and collapsed in a heap on the floor of the cage. I know my face was white. The desire to smash my fist into Borelli's mocking face was almost irresistible. Somehow I fought it back, said good night, and made my way into the street, both angry and bewildered. How could a thing of wood and cloth talk and behave like that? And why was the door of the cage padlocked? A cold wind blew rain in my face as I stepped out into the darkness. The pavement was deserted, and I paused by the stage door for a moment, trying to find some comfort for my shaken beliefs. Wait. Borelli had hypnotized me into believing I saw the dummy act like that. Probably he hypnotized his audiences in the same way. That was it. But the cat that suddenly appeared out of the darkness and rubbed itself against my leg made me jump like a frightened woman. Cursing Borelli again, I started up the street. Marilyn's birthday party was an elaborate affair. Her father owned a large manor house in Sussex, and he had had the hall transformed for the night into a most attractive ballroom. There was a full orchestra and well over 300 guests. To my disgust, Marilyn insisted we entertained Borelli at our table for the evening. The result was inevitable. Marilyn got going on her favourite topic, the supernatural, and with Borelli clearly interested in her, putting over his Latin charm, I found it difficult to get a word in, much less a dance. At last, in disgust, I retired to the bar to sulk on dry martinis. By midnight, I was beginning to think Marilyn had made herself too friendly. I couldn't see Borelli leaving her for Hugo now. If there was any hypnotism to be done, I could see Marilyn receiving it, and I watched them both like a hawk. But she must have asked him to put on the show, because at 12:30 he rose and left the hall. A few minutes later the band struck a chord, and an announcement was made that the famous Borelli had offered to entertain us. Couples retired to their tables. To a round of applause, Borelli appeared with the doll tucked unceremoniously under one arm. He took a chair in the centre of the dance floor and set the dummy on one knee. The lights were dimmed, a spotlight was put on him, and his act commenced. I listened intently, Again, it seemed there was an occasional marginal overlap between Varelli's sallies and those of the dummy. How it was done, I could not imagine. I made a point throughout the act of keeping my eyes off Varelli, and I willed myself not to be hypnotized. It made no difference. As at the theatre, Varelli put the dummy on its feet and told it to step forward and thank the audience for their kind reception. The gruesome little thing tottered forward, looking like a deformed dwarf learning to walk. Its straw-filled arms waved frantically as it struggled for balance. Its face grinned horribly in the dim light. The spotlight followed it to the fringe of the tables, where it stopped, swaying like a grotesque goblin. "Now, Hugo," Varelli called from his chair. "Say thank you to the kind ladies and gentlemen." The thing's lower jaw dropped. In the deathly silence, I heard the same gibbering I had heard in Varelli's dressing room. A young couple sitting at the table nearest the dummy were paralyzed, and their faces pale and strained. The doll's lower jaw opened again.
"Thank you, ladies and gentlemen,"
it faltered. There was a sudden abrupt movement at a table on the opposite side of the floor. A woman there had fainted and fallen from her chair. Varelli's attention was diverted for a moment from the doll. He jumped up and went forward as if to help the woman. The doll moved as if suddenly freed from invisible bonds. With fervid concentration, it made straight for the young couple's table. Both man and girl instinctively jumped back. The dummy's jaw was chattering in frantic eagerness as its upraised hand felt along the table which had been set for supper. It gripped a knife, and then it was scuttering back like a monkey, making straight for Varelli. In spite of the feeling that this was part of the act, cries of alarm and warning broke out among the audience. Varelli heard them and spun around. The dummy was not 10 feet from him, a murderous little figure in the unreal light. I was watching Varelli's face intently, and could have sworn it showed sudden fear. "Put it down!" he shouted. "Throw it down and come here!" The doll appeared to hesitate. Then the knife dropped to the floor. There was a gasp of relief from the spectators. The doll stumbled towards Varelli, who reached down and picked it up roughly. His voice was rough. One could imagine an undertone of fear in it. "When you become disobedient, it is necessary to chastise you. So," and he brought a hand down heavily across the doll's shoulders. The thing's head jerked forward dismally. A few half-amused cries of shame came from the audience. Varelli struck the doll savagely twice more before appearing to pull himself together. And then he turned and bowed. "Forgive my little Hugo's behavior," he murmured, "but the brilliance of the occasion seems to have been too much for him. He will now apologize." He set the dummy roughly on its feet. It stumbled blindly forward a few paces, then stopped. Its wooden jaw dropped open.
"I beg pardon,"
it wailed.
"I beg pardon, ladies and gentlemen."
I ordered a double martini.
"It's perfectly clear what happened,"
Marilyn told me indignantly while Varelli was returning the dummy to his room.
"His attention was diverted from the doll for a moment, and it took advantage by trying to get its revenge on him. That's why he keeps it caged up. If it were to catch him while he was asleep, when his mind lost control over it..."
"Rubbish!" I scoffed with a conviction I did not feel. That performance tonight was done deliberately to further this myth that he keeps his dead partner's soul chained in the dummy. Marilyn's voice was awed.
Didn't you see his face when he saw it coming for him? He looked terrified.
It was a part of the act, I muttered.
Nonsense. In any case, how do you explain the dummy's walking about the way it does?
It must be done by machinery, I told her. I had dropped the hypnotism idea. The thing must have a motor inside.
Don't be silly.
I'm not being silly. It has a motor and some kind of gramophone record. I'm sure that's how it's done. She shook her head.
No, darling. From what he has told me tonight, I know he has powers beyond ordinary men like you. Like you and Father,
she went on hastily to soften the blow. Look, I gritted. Get him drunk tonight and I'll prove he's a fake. He seems to like his whiskey. Keep him on it as hard as you can, and later we'll sneak into his room and take a peep at that doll. You'd like a look at it, wouldn't you? Like myself, Marilyn had had her fair share of refreshment. She giggled.
Of course I would, darling. But do you think we should?
Of course we should, I told her. Keep him drinking hard, and I promise you a good look at that dummy. Here he comes now. It worked very well. Varelli certainly liked whiskey, and with Marilyn's blue eyes encouraging him, and with me filling up his glass, he was in a pretty thin way by the end of the party. I led him to his room, helped him off with his jacket, and then rolled him into bed as he was. Before leaving, I took a quick look around the room. Sure enough, in a corner by the window was the cage with the dummy lying motionless inside. Varelli mumbled a thick good night as I left. His breathing deepened almost before I had closed the door behind me. I went straight to Marilyn, who by this time had said good night to the last of her guests. Give him 10 more minutes, I told her, and an atom bomb won't wake him.
Has he got the cage with him?
She asked in a thrilled whisper. Yes, he's got to keep up all the pretences, I sneered. But we can get hold of the dummy easily enough. I put his jacket over a chair, and there's a bunch of keys in one pocket. We waited a few minutes more, then crept to his room. As I have suggested, neither of us was his or her normal self, thanks to the party. We opened the door, listened a moment, then entered on tiptoe. I went over to his jacket, pulled out the bunch of keys. With Marilyn close behind me, I tiptoed to the cage and tried the keys in the padlock. At the third attempt, the lock flew open. I slid it out and opened the door. Then I reached inside the cage and pulled out the doll. I couldn't believe my eyes or my fingers. Well, the thing was nothing but cloth, wood, and straw. There wasn't even the usual gadgets for making the head nod and the mouth open. It was a doll, pure and simple. There was nothing that could possibly account for its antics on the stage. I suddenly found myself cold sober and trembling. Marilyn's face was pale in the dim light.
I told you it wasn't a trick, she whispered shakily. Put it back before something terrible happens.
I was just putting it back when something did happen. The thing seemed to twitch in my hands, as if suddenly awakened. In sudden fright, I dropped it into the cage and slammed the door closed.
What's the matter?
Marilyn gasped. Nothing, I muttered, telling myself feverishly that it was all imagination, nerves, and alcohol. To my relief, the doll lay motionless on the floor of the cage. The rattle of the cage door must have disturbed Forelli, however, for he muttered something and rolled over in bed. Marilyn gripped my arm in sudden panic.
"Come on, let's get out of here."
Willing enough, I hurried after her. Outside in the corridor, I realized how sober and ashamed I was. "Oh, we shouldn't have done that," I muttered. Woman-like, Marilyn wasn't concerned with the ethics of the affair, only the "I told you so" part of it.
"I said it wasn't run by machinery," she said triumphantly. "Now perhaps you'll be less sceptical in the future."
"There's a catch in it somewhere," I grunted. "There must be."
"Oh, you're impossible," she told me coldly. "I'm going to bed."
I was in bed myself before I remembered. In the shock of hearing Forelli stir, I had forgotten to padlock the cage door. A sudden rush of cold sweat soaked my pyjamas. I told myself I was a fool to worry about it. The cage was part of the act, and the dummy nothing else but cloth and wood. Had I not just proved that? It was no use. I had to go back. Slipping on my dressing gown, I crept down the corridor and into his room. The curtains were drawn back, and a single shaft of moonlight was now striking the floor in front of the window. Forelli appeared to be as I had left him. I could see his dark shape on the bed. Carefully, I tiptoed round the foot of the bed to where the cage was standing. The cage was right in the shaft of the moonlight. I drew nearer, then suddenly froze in horror. The barred door hung open, and the dummy had gone. For a full half-minute I could not move a muscle. Then, with cringing back, I turned slowly to the bed. I saw now that a smaller shape was lying on the bed beside Forelli. I wanted desperately to run from the room. I was certain that the hideous doll had somehow killed Forelli. Then, to my intense relief, I heard Forelli's breathing. With more courage now, I leaned over the bed to look at the dummy. It was lying spread-eagled between Forelli and the wall, with its face buried on his chest. Why had Forelli put it there? I had to convince myself he had done it, in order to work up enough courage to pick the thing up and return it to its cage. Or should I leave it where it was? As I was trying to make up my mind, Forelli, who from his breathing could have been sleeping only lightly, stirred and awoke. I stepped back sharply into the shadows of the doorway. The ventriloquist sat upright. The doll rolled from his chest and fell on the bed limply. With a savage imprecation, Forelli snatched it up and held it at arm's length. In the moonlight, his face appeared twisted with hate and triumph. He took the limp body savagely. Then, with another imprecation, he jumped out of bed and ran to the cage. He thrust the doll into it and snapped home the padlock. I could see the violent shivering of his body, even from the doorway. Able now to move unseen, I crept away and returned to my room. I could not make head nor tail of what I had seen. How had the dummy got onto the bed? If Forelli had put it there, and surely he must have done, then why had he behaved so strangely on waking? The alarming possibilities my imagination conjured up kept me awake most of the night, and then threw in a nightmare before breakfast for good measure. I missed Forelli the next morning. Owing to the nightmare, I was late down for breakfast, and he had already left. Marilyn, however, had seen him off.
"He was simply charming, dear," she told me. "Last night he did seem a little preoccupied and temperamental, but this morning he was simply sweet. You should have heard him thank me for inviting him. He was so grateful. Oh, that reminds me.
She went over to the sideboard and picked up a small gold cigarette case, which she handed to me.
The maid found this in his bedclothes after he had gone. Be a darling and drop it round him the next time you are near his theatre.
I took it with a scowl. I thought I'd finished with the brute.
After what you found out last night, I'd have thought you'd have held him in greater respect,
Marilyn said severely.
By the way, I shan't be going with you to the theatre on Friday. I'm going to hold a planchette party here.
I walked away, invoking fire and water to descend on Vorelli. I rang Vorelli that same day to tell him I had the case, but he was out when I phoned. So I sent a postcard saying I would bring it round to the theatre at my earliest opportunity. That proved to be 3 days later. I went round to the stage door, where the attendant told me to go to his dressing room. This I did, and knocked on the door. There was no reply. I tried again without success. Finally, I opened the door and peered inside. The room was empty. As my eyes fell on the curtained alcove opposite the door, a sudden desire to see the dummy again came over me. I tiptoed across the room and pulled aside the curtains. I got the shock of my life. The doll wasn't lying on the floor of the cage, but was standing against the padlocked door, and as the curtains parted, it turned its face sharply towards me. I went rigid with horror. The thing immediately began tugging madly at the cage. One cloth arm came through the bars in a ghastly gesture of appeal, and its jaws chattered frantically. But worst of all was its ghastly, grinning face. For somehow it had seemed to recognize me. The familiar gibbering, the prelude to speech, began. Had I been able, I would have fled, but even my eyes were paralyzed. They could do nothing but stare in fascination at the frantic doll. The gibbering ceased. A ghastly voice moaned out.
Blake, help me. Get me out, quickly, before he comes back.
The crowning horror. It did recognize me. It used my name. Worse, there was something dreadfully familiar about its voice. For a moment, the doll, cage, and room swam before my eyes.
Help me, Blake. Break open the door. Don't leave me.
My voice frightened me. What are you? What do you want? The thing struck its head against the bars. It waved its arms in despair.
Can't you understand?
It moaned.
The other night, after you left open the cage, he escaped, and I was drunk, helpless, so he robbed me. Took my place, and don't you understand? I am Vorelli.
I was too dazed to hear the door open behind me. Only when he spoke did I know he had returned. Lie down and be quiet, he told the doll sternly. I shall want you fresh for the performance tonight. Go to sleep, you go. The doll gave me one last agonized look. Then its legs sagged. With a soft thud, it collapsed on the floor of the cage and lay motionless. The man who looked like Vorelli saw my face. He gave a quiet laugh. Don't worry, Mr. Blake. You have not lost your mind. What Vorelli has told you is true. The other night you gave me the opportunity for which I have waited for years. And now the tables are turned. I found my voice at last. But you can't do this. It's hellish." His deep-set eyes were narrowed, his face twisted. It could be called poetic justice, could it not? I stepped forward with clenched fists. He saw my intention and shook his head. "It would not help him. If you destroyed the dummy, I could easily make another for him, and you will get no help from outside because no one will believe you. No, there is nothing you can do, Mr. Blake. Good night." I have never told any of this to Marilyn. I dare not. That's why she has so often asked me why I can't bear to watch a child playing with a doll. Because I can't. It turns my stomach over. Today's story was The Devil Doll by Frederick E. Smith. It was read by Jasper L'Estrange. Well, I do hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, sweet dreams.